In this tutorial, we are going to learn how to use the virtual instruments in Propeller Head's Reason software inside of Pro Tools. I've got some tracks set up here, MIDI tracks, instrument track, and auxiliary track, and you'll see that setting up a Reason instrument in Pro Tools is much the same as setting up one of Pro Tools' own virtual instruments. First off, you want to have Pro Tools open first, then launch Reason. The reason for that is Reason will go into slave mode with another software open, which means it'll go under the control of that software. If you open Reason first, it'll just run as an independent piece of software and will not connect to Pro Tools. So here we are with an empty rack. I'm going to bring it up in a window. And it's very easy to add instruments to Reason. You can drag them from this viewer here. So I'm going to add the subtractor instrument, analog synthesizer, and the Dr. Rex loop player. You'll notice that Reason has its own sequencer here at the bottom. We're not going to use this. We're going to use the sequencer in Pro Tools. So you want to make sure that these are disabled. So I'm clicking on the keyboards and making sure neither one of these instruments is outlined in red. If it's outlined in red, we're going to get a double MIDI trigger, one from Pro Tools and one from within Reason. So we want those disabled. Okay, one of the things that's unique about using these external virtual instruments is you have to make both a MIDI connection to and an audio connection from. So I'm going to press the Tab key. That flips the rack around to the back. And you'll see there's a virtual cable plugged into the subtractor audio output. So I'm going to move these around a little bit. I'm going to plug this into 3. Notice it says audio output here. And I'm going to take the audio outputs from our Dr. Rex player and put them in 5 and 6. And we'll want to remember these numbers when we're back in Pro Tools. Something else that's cool that you can do in Reason is change the names of the modules, and those names will show up in a list in Pro Tools. So I'm going to change the subtractor name. Something like that. This is really handy if you have multiple subtractor instruments and multiple Dr. Rex instruments. You can give each of them their own unique name. Okay, I'll hit the Tab key again, brings it back to the front. Everything looks set. Notice there's little green lights here at the top on some of the audio outputs that shows the connections I've made. Last thing before we go back into Pro Tools, we need to save this file with our session so that when we take our session folder and move it to another computer, we'll have the Pro Tools file and the Reason file. So I'll go here, save as, and give it some sort of a descriptive name. Okay, so let's just take a look at my session folder real quick. You see that I have all my Pro Tools files and I have this Reason file in there as well. You need both. Okay, now the connections. The first connections I'm going to make are actually the audio input connections, the audio coming from Reason into Pro Tools. Once the audio is going in, the MIDI tracks can see a MIDI destination. So let's start with the Rex drums. I'll go to the inserts. Just like choosing a Pro Tools virtual instrument, I'll go under Instrument. Let me move it so you can see it all. Multi-channel, Instrument, and I will choose Reason. Now here's where we need to remember the numbers. If you remember, I can look at my rack here. We plugged the Dr. Rex module into audio outputs 5 and 6. So I want to choose 5 and 6. If I choose a different number, we won't have any output. So I'm going to choose 5 and 6. Now I'm going to go to my auxiliary track, and I'm setting this one up just the way you would in Pro Tools with a virtual instrument on an aux track and MIDI tracks triggering it. So I'll do the same thing, insert. I purposely made a mono aux track because the subtractor is a mono instrument, one channel. So I go to reason again, and if we look above, we can see that I plugged the subtractor into channel 3, so I choose channel 3, and we're almost ready. So we've got the audio connections made here. Now all we need to do is get the MIDI out to reason. So for these MIDI tracks, these are both going to send instructions to the subtractor module. So I'll choose for their output. Now these are MIDI tracks, so their output is to a MIDI device, not to an audio device. And I can see there's actually the name I gave my subtractor module. It's right there. Okay. And this one, I'm going to actually record continuous controller instructions. So I'm going to choose both the input and the output to be subtractor. We'll see how that works in a later tutorial. Okay. Now if I hit record here, I've just enabled, make sure that my MIDI through is turned on. Yes, it is. And we should hear the subtractor instrument. All right, we've got some sound. Now let's go to our other instrument, the Rex drums track. There's something missing in the view here that we need to see, and that's the instrument section. That's where we choose the MIDI destination. So I'm going to go to the bottom menu, probably pop out of view, and I'm choosing instrument. And we see the instrument section up there now. Right now the destination is none, but if I click on here, I can see Dr. Rex drums. That's the module I renamed in Reason. Choose that. And now we're making a connection to the Dr. Rex module. Let's see if anything's coming out of that. And we've made the connection. Now we're ready to record some MIDI in the MIDI tracks and instrument tracks, and those will play back through the Reason modules.